Okay, um, so I'm going to tell you a story about something that happened when I was 15. And this is a story that I've told many times to many people, um, mostly to people that are really close to me, um, a few times to almost complete strangers. And the big difference is most people don't know the full story, and a lot of people don't even know this about me. A lot of people know me and don't know the real story behind how I got to be the person I am today. This story that I'm going to tell is only a very small part of that, but it is probably the biggest thing that has ever happened to me in my life. The biggest life-changing, life-shaping event. And everything that I'm going to tell you is 100% true. In fact, a lot of it is going to sound crazy. It's not going to sound like too crazy that it was definitely made up, but it definitely sounds like something out of a movie. So for that, I'm going to link the article that was actually written about me when this happened back in 2013 from the local news. The story never, even though it was a pretty big, crazy thing, never really ended up going, getting pretty popular outside of the local news station. It was on ABC for a very brief time, but because I think the main reason was I wasn't able to do more interviews after the initial one. I think just due to a lot of things that were going on at the time. And so I just had to check and see if it was recording because I don't have a camera or anything. It's just me sitting in my living room, my webcam. And this is a story I've been wanting to tell for a long time. I've always known that it's a very impactful story that God wants me to tell at some point. And lately I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think that me making this video is going to help me, so I can actually watch it and watch myself telling the story, because every time I tell it, I usually go into more detail, and because I've been thinking about it a lot, trying to get back to that, it was a pretty traumatic experience, and I don't think I have PTSD from it, but however, I do think about it a lot, and I try to piece together the memories to make it as factual and realistic as possible. This is going to be a very long video. I'm just going to say that straight up because it's a long story, and I'm going to tell it as cohesively and quickly as possible, but I want to give the whole backstory. Well, not the whole, I guess I want to give the backstory, a bit of follow-up story, and not just the actual thing that happened, because you have to understand the whole context behind it in order to really grasp the full impact of it. And I'll probably maybe make more videos about it, detailing certain parts later on, if this video actually gets any interest and people want that. But this is going to be a pretty just full-on, I guess the long story as short as possible. Okay, so for some backstory, I guess I'm 21 years old right now. This happened when I was 15. I had just turned 15. This was in November of 2013. At the time, I lived in Redding, California, which is really north in California. It's about the biggest small town. It's about 3 hours north of Sacramento, 3 hours east of the coast, and about a 3-hour drive maybe from Oregon, the northern border, mostly because up there is just mountains. Redding sits at the top of Sacramento Valley, I think it is. It's surrounded by mountains on three sides. You've got Mount Shasta, kind of an hour north from Redding, and then from there is Shasta Lake. There's a dam, and then this river, Sacramento River, that flows from there, and it supplies a lot of water to most of the California area. It supplies a lot of water. It's beautiful up there. But yeah, so Redding is the city that's about an hour south of Shasta Lake, and the river, the Sacramento River, runs right through it. And my family and I moved there when I was 14, and at the beginning of May 2013, and we moved there actually to go to Bethel Church. A lot of you may have heard of this. A lot of people may not have heard of this church, but it's a really awesome church out there. My parents felt called to go out there, as many people do, by God, and because it's just a place where a lot of people take the next step in their faith. People come from all over the world. We moved there from Orlando, Florida, in 2013. I was born and raised in Florida, so moving to California when I was 14 was the second time I moved in my life, and it was the biggest move I've ever made. We drove across the country with a Penske truck full of all of our things from our very large house, and moved to a very comparatively small 3-bedroom house. I have 3 younger siblings, so there was 6 of us in a 3-bedroom condo. Pretty tight squeeze, as you can imagine, coming from a much larger house where each of us kids had our own bedroom. Well, actually, no, I shared a bedroom with my sister at the time, but we had a really big house. So moving from that obviously was a big change. Anyway, that's just basic backstory. But so at the time we moved there, I had anorexia. I developed anorexia when I was about 12. I remember really my 13th birthday is kind of the big landmark when it really became a big deal. And it wasn't, it was pretty bad when I was that age. I'm not going to name numbers just because I don't want to, trigger anybody, but I was pretty small. I know I'm pretty small right now. I still do suffer from anorexia and body dysmorphia. However, my lifestyle I'm a lot healthier than I was at the time, and I don't have a great handle on things, but I'm working on it. Basically, ever since I was 12, even before then, I've suffered from body dysmorphia and disordered eating. It's varied throughout the years, but the consistency was anorexia. I was diagnosed when I was 13. I was diagnosed. My mom took me to the doctor, and it was pretty obvious right away. She said I had anorexia. So while I was living in Florida, it is a bit of a struggle at first, but as I said, it wasn't that bad. I ended up getting on a plan of eating a certain amount of calories a day. I was eating, like 6 meals a day. I was still very, very controlled and rigid. I planned out my food like to the letter, I counted every single calorie. It was very rigid, but I at least was eating enough to maintain a healthy lifestyle, a very low body weight, but not dangerously low. And I was also very shy at that age. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was homeschooled. All of my siblings were. We went to a co-op like 1 day a week. I had one good friend there. Everyone else I thought didn't like me. Turns out people just actually thought that I didn't want to be friends with them, which makes me really sad in retrospect because I actually really wanted friends, and I just thought everyone didn't want to be friends with me. But the truth is, I was just really shy, and felt like nobody wanted to be my friend. And I think that is something that contributed to that. There's a lot of things. I still don't know why I developed anorexia. This friend thing was after that. I had a very good friend that I lost when I was about 11, kind of when all the disordered eating started. And that's probably the biggest thing that triggered it. But I don't know. I still, to this day, am asking the Lord and trying to figure out why I developed that and why I still have these issues. But anyway, that's not the main point of this video. The main point is to tell the biggest thing that happened. That is not exactly about anorexia. That is part of it, but I basically, my near-death experience, which was, anyway, I'll get into that. So yeah, I had a near-death experience. I sometimes say I shouldn't be alive right now. I don't think that's necessarily the best way to say it, because obviously God wants me to be alive, and that's kind of a thing that has gotten me through a lot of difficult times that I have and still have to this day in my life, is remembering, hey, you're probably alive for a reason. God obviously saved you when you were 15. You really could have died. A lot of other people in your same circumstance would have died, and if God had not intervened, you definitely would not be here today. So that's another big point of this, is that God is real. He's very real, and He is 100%. I would not be alive if He had not purposely intervened. Divine intervention saved me, and you will find that out at the end of this video. Whether or not you believe in God, I think you will still be like, wow, that was, there's something to that. Okay, anyway, so like I said, I was anorexic. We moved to California when I was 14. During that move was when it kind of started to get worse, I think, due to a lot of things. I think part of the thing was just I got really stressed out due to moving. I did want to move. At the time, I was bored with life in Florida. I was excited about moving to California. But it was an extremely stressful move. Just the actual move in of itself is a whole crazy story. We drove obviously across the country. It was like a 7-day trip, staying in random places. I mean, I got to see a lot of the country. We drove through complete wilderness in Nevada, Utah, Kansas. We outran a tornado. There was actually a tornado that went through Kansas like the day after we got out of Kansas. We had to stop in Colorado in this little tiny town out of nowhere because there was a blizzard. Driving for endless hours through the desert. Back then, I mean, I'm a geology student now, and back then I didn't really appreciate the amazing geological wonders that I was seeing. I kind of wish I had, but I did get to see a lot of awesome things, and I definitely want to go back there as an adult and see these things. That as a geology graduate, hopefully by that time, I'd be like, whoa, these things are like amazing. But I did get to see a lot of things as a 14-year-old that a lot of other kids my age didn't get to see, and my younger siblings, obviously, who are younger than me, got to see that too. So that's also really cool. But that's a different story. Anyway, so we finally got to Redding, May 2013. Moved in. Everything was peachy for a little while. It really wasn't. There were a lot of family issues going on at the time, a lot of stress between my mom and dad. I'm not going to get into that because that's their private issue. But for me, I didn't really, I noticed a lot of it, but I was wrapped up in my own little world of anorexia. And I'm not blaming my parents at all, because they obviously tried everything they could to help me. I was very, very stubborn. I didn't they did try to force me to eat. They did everything they possibly could do, and I flat out refused. And it got to this point where they were just like, you know what, we give up. Honestly, like they just let me do my own thing because there were so many things going on, and it just I was going to do what I was going to do, and but eventually. So I was actually elated at that point because when I lived in Florida, there was a time, I hated being forced to eat. I hated them, staying up with me till midnight with a bowl of Cheerios or a peanut butter sandwich or something, or even a freaking banana. Like, they would literally stay up with me all night until I finally ate, or they might have given up, or I finally cracked and ate. And I mean, there were countless nights. Sometimes I would sit outside and because I refused for hours because I refused to eat. Those are different stories. Anyway, that was at the very, very beginning, and then it did get better for a period of time. But basically, what I'm saying is moving kind of turned my whole world upside down, and just in the chaos of moving, the stress of everything going on with my parents and family, and my mom was going to Bethel Supernatural School of Ministry at the time, so she wasn't home all the time. My dad was working as a recruiter. He was working from home, but he was obviously busy. And then there were 3 younger kids, too. My siblings, my youngest sister is 12 years younger than me, so she was obviously very little at the time. Other 2 siblings were in elementary school. And anyway, we did, it was the summer, we moved there obviously at the summer, so we weren't all in school till the very end. And anyway, things slowly got worse. And eventually at one point, this was August, right before school was going to start, I was actually going to start at a public, it was a charter high school, 9th grade, and which was a big deal for me because I had been homeschooled most of my life. I mean, I had gone to co-ops and things, but I was going to actually try going to real school, and my siblings were too, which obviously, for reasons you'll find out, it ended up really not working out. I basically went to that school for 1 semester and then had to switch to homeschool again, and I barely went to school all that semester because I was in the hospital a lot. I was sick a lot. But yeah, so what happened was one day I was, I really got to the point where I was barely eating anything. I lost weight on top of the weight that I was already really thin, really small, smaller than I am now. Or actually probably about this size, just shorter, younger, so I weigh more now than I did then, but I looked about the same, as I can tell, from pictures, the few pictures we have. But anyway, I lost more weight on top of that. I was barely eating. I got to the point where I was terrified of eating practically anything. My parents were begging me to eat. They would take me to the store and just please, just buy anything. Is there anything you can possibly eat? And I was just I don't know. I just can't. I was terrified to eat. Don't know even what I was terrified of. I just thought eating anything would make me fat. I remember making this really watery vegetable soup, and I would eat nothing but that. And feeling lightheaded and sick, but also happy because I liked that feeling. I still do like that feeling of being empty, and that's something that baffles people, even baffles me. I'm I don't know why I feel that way, but I do anyway. But it got to the point where it was really, I've said that a lot. One day my legs were kind of swelling up. My parents were noticing, and it was really weird. My mom was really concerned. I was just oh, why are my legs swollen? Ew, I look fat, of course. But I tried a lot of things like massaging them, laying upside down with my legs on the wall, trying to get the blood flow circulating, but nothing was working. They're like, all right, you're going to the doctor. So we went to this doctor. None of us had been to the doctor before out there, so we didn't have like a primary care doctor. We went to this pretty, I'm going to say, country doctor, not to be like rude or anything. It was a very like private practice, just like a small, out of like a house. He was a nice guy, but he was a little bit very to the point and brash, and like the nurse, I remember her looking at me absolutely bewildered. It was a kid's hospital, pediatric, but they tried to take my blood pressure. They said they couldn't even get a reading. The blood pressure cuff, my arm was so small that it like wouldn't even fit around it. They took my heart rate. I'm pretty sure it was like, stats were like, it was like 40 beats per minute or something. The doctor basically came to us and was like, okay, listen, basically, you are dying and you need to get to the hospital right now. And I was like, what are you saying? I'm dying? What? And my parents obviously flipped out. This whole moment, like, this was very surreal. Anyway, we rushed home. Of course, Reading did have a hospital, but he was like, you have to go to Sacramento. So we rushed home, frantically packed things. It was just crazy. I obviously didn't want to go. I didn't think I needed to, of course. My parents, we all went down, all 6 of us, checked into the hospital and they were like, what's going on? And we're like, well, the doctors told us she needs to be here and she's anorexic and at first they didn't know what to do with me. I still remember sitting in the hospital and like, this isn't too bad. And at this point, it was a regular hospital, not like an eating disorder ward or anything, so they weren't like forcing me to eat. And I was like, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can handle, starting to eat more and getting a little better. But I was thinking of like, eating things like yogurt and carrot sticks and fruit, like things that I eat now that are like safe foods for me. Anyway, and I was like, actually not freaking out too much, but then they were like, okay, we don't have the resources to take care of you here. You need to go to eating disorder hospital. And I was like, wait, what? They're like, you need to be transferred and you need to go now. And so basically they sent me to, I'm not sure what the hell, I think it was El Camino Hospital in Palo Alto. They have a place called Comprehensive Care Program. Obviously, I'm going to try not to say anything bad about it because to me, my experience was totally biased. Obviously, as a 14-year-old, I was like going to a place where they were going to force me to eat. I thought it was basically like going to jail for me. But I know it did save my life at the time. I put that in air quotes because it was, like I said, it was like torment for me. And I know it is like that for pretty much all the girls. I mean, it was mostly girls. The first time I was there, I ended up being there 3 times, actually, in total. I'm pretty sure there were only girls. One time I was there was a boy. Most of them were teenagers. I remember at one time there was a woman who was over 18, but she had actually voluntarily admitted herself. Of course, I was 14 at the time, hadn't turned 15 yet, so I was legally obligated to go. But anyway, they transferred me in an ambulance. They wouldn't even let my parents drive me down there. I remember thinking, why do I need to be in an ambulance? But at the time, the guys who were driving it were being really cool. My mom rode with me. It was, this whole time I was thinking, things are really not that bad, but things were obviously a lot worse than I thought. In retrospect, I look back, I'm like, yeah, this was, as much as I hate it, I did need to go. Anyway, this is not even the biggest part of the story, but so I ended up being there 3 weeks. Basically, it was not a residential care unit. It was just a place where they got you up to a stable body weight and a stable place where your blood pressure was stable. It was still low. It's a place where you were basically stable enough that you could go home, continue to be on this meal plan that they sent, which obviously I ended up not following because it was obnoxious. And I mean, it wasn't an obnoxious meal plan. Give someone who is anorexic, is terrified of food, and be like, okay, so you need to be eating, like something they recommended was like spaghetti and meatballs, which to me was horrifying food. I ended up going like vegetarian at this time, and then like have like, and it was like a big serving that they recommended, and this was just like a dinner, and then like a brownie or something with dessert. These are like huge fear foods, and then for me, and having like a peanut butter sandwich for lunch or something like that. Anyway, so at the hospital, they had these foods that we were put on meal plans. We're not told how many calories were in them, but me, being the little calorie genius that I was, pretty much was able to calculate at least what I thought everything had, because I knew and still know pretty much the calorie amount and fat amount of most foods, because I knew it all. I studied it all. I was obsessed with it. Anyway, obviously did not want to eat these things. Basically, they would be like, okay, you have to eat this or you have to drink a replacement, which was Ensure, which comes in little cans, and it's basically sugar, water, and oil and protein powder mixed together. A very calorie dense liquid, and I hated those too because I didn't want to be drinking pure sugar and fat as I saw it, but a lot of times I ended up replacing the meals with that because I just was terrified to eat these things that they were forcing me. The only other option to that would have been going, if you refused to drink that, they would have put a feeding tube in your nose. And I do remember seeing one girl who was younger even than I was on a feeding tube. It terrified me, the thought of being on that, having a tube in your nose that just, it was looked painful, terrifying. I didn't want any part of that. So most of the time I drank the Ensures, ate what I could, basically just tried to get out of there as fast as possible. It took, me a lot longer than some people because I was at such a low weight. It felt like months. It was 3 weeks. My dad did stay with me. A lot of the patients were there alone. My parents, I'd never been anywhere alone, like aside from like staying at my grandmother's house overnight or staying at a friend's house overnight, as a kid, but I had never been away from my parents for that long. So my dad stayed with me. He, like I said, was working from home, so he was able to work at the hospital. He stayed in the hospital room with me on a couch. And my mom had to balance going to school and taking care of the other kids, and it was pretty difficult. I obviously missed my family like crazy. They came down to visit a couple times. Having my dad there really did help. But it still was a really, really, really hard time. However, the first time, in retrospect, I'm like, the first time was a piece of cake compared to the second time. And then the second time was a piece of cake compared to the third time, because the third time happened after my near-death experience. And basically at the end of that, I was, because of not only being there a third time, but also the near-death experience, which I know they all were suspicious that it was on purpose, which I told everyone that it was an accident, because I knew, I was smart enough to know, if I told them that it was not entirely an accident, I would have been pretty much sent to somewhere with no hope of getting out for a long time. And I was smart enough to know I needed to fudge the truth as much as possible. Okay, disclaimer, I'm going to say this event that I'm going to tell you about soon. I just want to finish the whole backstory first. I thought about it a lot after. It was not a suicide attempt. My purpose was not with the intent of killing myself. However, I did want to hurt myself in a way that would distract from my current situation of anorexia. And that is what I realized was in my head at the time. I had turned 15. This was what I thought, I truly believed was my best option at the time, to escape being sent to the hospital a third time, but also to escape having to eat and recover and get better. So basically, long story short, went home after that third time. 2 weeks later, I was back because the same thing happened. I refused to eat. Parents were like, you know what? You don't eat, we're taking you back to the hospital. Happened pretty quickly. Then was there 2 weeks, second time. Second time was a little worse than the first time because they were, by then, they were a little sick of me, is my theory, and they were still nice at that point, but, by then things were stricter. They're like, okay, you gotta really stick to this next time. They, of course, recommended going to inpatient treatment. My parents didn't want me to. They wanted me at home. I certainly didn't want to. I wanted to be at home with my parents. Also, there was no way we could afford it. I mean, these places are ridiculously expensive. They talked it down, made some, oh, your insurance will cover it. No, that's a lie. If I had been forced to go somewhere, it would have been bad financially. And anyway, so second time, went home, my parents were like, look, this time we're just going to let you do your thing because we know that you're not going to listen to us. We're not even going to try to force you to eat. It's up to you. If you don't eat, you're going back to the hospital and potentially going to inpatient. And I was like, all right, whatever. Obviously, I didn't want to eat. I remember them getting so frustrated with me, and I thought, they were mad at me. And I know now as an adult, it was out of a place of complete terror that their daughter was basically killing herself, and they felt powerless because I wouldn't listen to them. And I feel not bad for that because I understand the place I was, but I do feel bad. Anyway, so here's where the near-death experience happens. Not that the anorexia itself, that was, I guess, could be counted as a near-death experience, especially the first time. If we hadn't gone to the doctor and hadn't gone to the hospital, I could have died then, I guess. But this was a real-life survival moment, like pure movie, like quality content. Like I said, this all 100% happened. I'm going to try and tell it in as best detail as I can. I might go into more detail in later videos. I've been talking for a long time already. Hopefully you're still watching. Hopefully you're still interested. If not, I'm just going to keep talking because this is honestly quite therapeutic, and I'm going to watch it later myself and send it to people when they're like, oh, so what's the thing that happened to you? I'm like, here's a video. So I can rest my voice because I get tired of telling this story. As much as I love to tell it, it's a lot of words. Anyway, so I remember this day very clearly. My mom had left for school. I remember the last encounter I had with her was a pretty angry one. She was trying to force me to eat, but she was mad, obviously, because I was like refusing. She went to school. She was upset with my dad because they were having, a thing. My siblings, were at home. This was in November, so, later on, I had turned 15. I guess it was a weekend or like after school one day. Anyway, I remember I was sitting in my bedroom looking at a cookbook. It was an old Betty Crocker cookbook because even though I refused to eat, I was obsessed with food. I still am. It's a thing that many anorexics, actually, I found afterwards was a common thing that anorexics will look at pictures of food, cookbooks, fantasize about eating food, make food for other people. It was a thing that I did. I was obsessed with food. I still am. I still sometimes will look at recipes or watch food videos just because I don't want to eat, but I love food. Who doesn't? Anyway, I was looking for the most decadent recipes possible, just vicariously eating through looking at pictures, and sitting in this old green chair that I had with this green blanket that I had, just alone in my room. And I don't even remember, I'm still trying to pinpoint exactly what the thought was, but I had this thought, and I was like, you know what, I think that I need to do something about this situation. I knew that it was impending, that I was going to be forced to go to the hospital if I didn't start eating. I didn't want to do that. I knew what would happen if I went back a third time. Certainly didn't want to, but I certainly didn't want to start eating. And I was like, you know what? I need to do something that will distract from the anorexia. What if I hurt myself in a way that would distract from the anorexia? And what if I had to go to the hospital, but it was not for anorexia? And I actually think I was not intending to do this, but I think I'm going to make a second video because I'm actually running out of space on this webcam video thing that I'm recording on. And this turned out to be a lot longer, explaining the full backstory than I intended. But this story that I told you was just the backstory, and it was not the actual near-death experience. So I'm going to make a part 2 to this and upload it same day, same time, so you can watch it. I'll upload them at the same time. Anyway, if you watched all this way, thank you. Hopefully you'll be interested in the next video. And if you truly just want to watch the survival video, like about the survival experience, that would be the next video. So this, I guess, is the backstory. The next one will be the actual thing that happened and then the aftermath. But anyway, thank you for watching if you did, and I'm glad I did this. This has been helpful, and I'm looking forward to making the next one. Okay, bye.